what I do for God in His kingdom is much more impactful than how many sacks I get, how many tackles I make, or anything like that. Like it's so much more important. So I would just tell myself to don't grow weary in waiting, whether that's with a relationship, whether that's with football, whether that's with anything. Like be patient because every single thing that's happened in my life has brought me closer to Him.
Turn on the lamp. I don't go postal till God give his stamp. We going global, I'm in with the champs. I sit at the Oval, they told me I can't. Turn on the lamp. I don't go postal till God give his stamp. We going global.
Welcome back to Turn on the Lamp podcast. It's your host, Devin Lamp, and I'm so excited to introduce our next guest, Mr. Dominic Oliver, all the way from Western Kentucky University, linebacker, standout, a.k.a. San Diego State standout. I appreciate you for joining the show and taking time out of your day, bro.
Yes, sir, man. Thank you for having me, bro. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely, bro. So kind of tell us, what is the season that God has you in? I know that fall camp is approaching. You're going on your last year of football and collegiately, right? So what is this season that God has you in spiritually and mentally as well?
Yeah, I would say for me, the season that God has me in is really just a step out on faith. You know, I always say this quote to my buddies in our studies that sometimes God will show you the next step and not the mountaintop, or the mountaintop and not the next step. And for me, I feel like I've always seen my dream of playing in the NFL as the mountaintop, and I didn't really know exactly how to get there. But this next step for me, moving across the country to, Lord willing, get a better opportunity to, start and to make plays to fulfill that dream that I've been having. So for me, it's really just a step out on faith and true commitment to Him. No distractions out here. You know what I'm saying? I'm really just focused on my dream and most importantly, growing my relationship with God in this time of isolation.
So obviously there's a climate difference, right? There's a geographical difference between the Cali lifestyle. You got beaches and stuff, and then Kentucky, you over there probably with cows and stuff, right? So kind of talk about what that change has done for you and how you've adapted to that change as well.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I grew up in the Bay Area, San Jose, moved down to San Diego. So two just beautiful cities, great weather. We never really had any challenges with weather. I saw thunder one time in my life, and that was in 2020, right before I moved to college. And I thought the world was ending. I was like, man, why is there, all that stuff? So great weather and all that stuff and great community. I think for me, the biggest change, obviously, aside from weather, like being in San Diego for 4 years of college and moving to Kentucky, my first month here was the first time I ever seen snow in my life. And then more, it's like I would text my dad one day. I'm like, Dad, during the spring, I'd be like, today is the worst thunder I've ever heard, the loudest thunder I've ever heard. And then the next day, I'd have to send him another text, be like, well, today's even louder. And the next day is even louder. So the weather's definitely been an adjustment. It's super humid. But aside from that, I think that the biggest adjustment for me has just been like I touched on before, just this time of isolation. I think that my whole life I've been surrounded by men and women of God who have just pushed me and been able to hold me accountable. And moving out here initially, I didn't have that. But I found it quickly, and I'm super grateful for that because that's something that I always prioritize and wanted to have. But I think for me, what has kept me in my time here in Kentucky has just been that, man, like keeping the main thing. Like I have 1 year to drastically grow my relationship with God and to drastically improve my draft stock, Lord willing. So I have all my attention towards that. And I know that all my brothers and sisters in Christ and my family, of course, will be there when I get back to California,
As a athlete, right, when you're pursuing a dream, sometimes we can often get in a space where it's like kind of finding the balance between, pursuing that football dream, that God given dream, and also, like you said, tailoring and spending time in your relationship with God. So when I was out there in California, one thing that I really appreciated about you, bro, is those Bible studies that you will hold with our teammates and stuff, and just getting around. And, it wasn't very long, but just that community aspect that you're talking about. So how do you keep that balance between working really hard at this goal that God has placed on your heart, but also understanding that, spending time in His presence is just as important, if not more important, as well?
100%. Yeah, that's a good question. And I appreciate that. I think that one thing a mentor in my life told me was that there's no distinction between the spiritual and the secular. And what he meant by that was I was telling him, I grew so much in my faith during quarantine because I was reading the Bible for hours a day. I was watching sermons and I would be having Bible studies with my boys. That's all I did every single day, apart from working out. So when I get back into the real world where there's more distractions and the world is, moving at the pace that it does, it's easy to be like, man, like I'm never gonna be able to grow as much as I did at that time during quarantine. But he told me that because he's saying that if you look, there's every single opportunity that we have in a day, playing football, working out, talking to people, doing our work, all of that is for God's glory, and all of that we can be dwelling with God in that because God is omnipresent, like we know. So I think that understanding that, okay, just because I'm not reading the word as long as I was before doesn't mean I can't have quality time with Him in His presence. So I think that's been the biggest thing for me, just understanding that football is an act of worship towards God. He's given me this gift so I can bring Him glory. So I'm going to do that. And if I'm not doing that, then that's a disservice to Him. And I'm not, doing the best with the talents He's given me in the same way that, okay, now I still have to give him my first fruits though. So whether that means I got to wake up a little earlier and read, to show God that I'm committed to him above anything else. But yeah, there's just a lot of practical things you could do to show God that you're being obedient to him. But football or whatever you're doing, football for me is also a way that, you can bring him glory.
Let's throw all the way back from the early start of your football journey. What are those kind of pivotal moments in your football career where you can look back and say, like, man, like at the time it may have been, kind of less than ideal, but I definitely see God's hand working through that.
Yeah, I think that there were definitely some challenges growing up, but in comparison to what I faced recently in college, I guess they don't really compare, as far as like, the challenges and what's helped me grow closer to God. So there's certainly some challenges like growing up, high school, not making varsity my sophomore year like I wanted to. But I look back on those and every single adversity that I faced brought me closer to God and it helped and it ended up working out for my betterment in football as well. So I think my freshman year when I got to college, was getting ready to be starting on special teams as a true freshman, maybe even getting some reps in on defense potentially. But I tore my meniscus like right at the beginning of camp. And that was the biggest challenge in my life, physically, spiritually up until that point relating to sports because it took my identity away from me. And I think that like you touched on before, like when you're playing a sport or whatever has most of your attention, you got to put the most time in. It's really easy for us to put our identity in that, especially when you're getting praised for, getting offers, performing on the field. Like it's really easy to put your identity in that. But I was putting my identity in something that was fleeting or not a strong foundation. When in reality, I should have been putting it in God. And although there have been challenges, ups and downs, whether it was injury, position change, coaching changes, all of those things, even though there were some ups and downs, they brought me closer to God in the end. So I'm super grateful for them looking back on it. And going to San Diego State, I thought to myself, I was like, man, like this is I'm gonna be go to the league. I'm gonna break the sack record, all these high expectations with football, and I felt like God called me to be there, and He 100% did call me to be there. Just wasn't for the reason that I expected to. I was able to, like you talked about, start those Bible studies. I was able to, baptize some of my teammates and make a brotherhood and get a chance to meet my future wife. Like those are all like things that I'm extremely grateful for and confirmation that I made the right decision to go to San Diego State. But now I'm hoping that I'm able to make more of an impact on the field as well here in Kentucky. That's the goal, at least.
So I want you to touch on that, bro. How was that
Yeah.
experience baptizing your teammate? Um, it can be a very intimate and intricate moment in someone's faith journey, their
Yeah.
initial first baptism. So how much did that mean to you that you were able to share that moment with him?
I think the biggest word for me would just be humbling. And I'm even got to chill right now when you ask that because I haven't thought about it in a while. But it's just like the people in my life that I've baptized or even that give me credit for having an impact on their life spiritually. I always think to myself, I'm like, man, I'm so unworthy and I'm so like I didn't do a thing other than tell you what I knew and tell you what God was doing in my life. and they give me so much credit. I'm like, wow, like this really just shows you that God, like God is working on everyone's heart. You know, God is calling everyone to him. He's wooing his people to him because, you know, my buddy Brady, for example, my freshman year, we were roommates, and every now and then he would ask me some questions about God. Come to find out, but you know, and I would answer them just to my capability. But I'm sure I messed up sometimes and didn't give him the best responses. But then 2 years later, he faces some adversity, and he's asking me these questions. He's bringing up all these things I told him freshman year that I didn't even realize I was telling him, and gives his life to Christ and asked me to baptize him. Like that's just one example of how important it is to like really be prepared to like answer questions that people ask of you, but also understand that like there's nothing I can do or say to to bring someone to Christ or to take them away. Like God is gonna bring the people to him that he wants to bring to him. And I'm just grateful that I was able to be a vessel and part of that journey for him, you know?
I love how you're using your platform to really glorify the Lord. How can a person that's in the busyness of college sports, you got classes, you got,
Yeah,
fall camp coming up for a lot of athletes. How can one stay on the path of knowing that my identity is not wrapped up in my sport,
yeah,
but it's absolutely something that I have to pour into and devote my time to? But what are some things that somebody can do to kind of remind themselves of their true identity, and that's
yeah.
being a child of God?
That's good. I would say giving God your first fruits. So your time in the morning, you got to wake up like 10 to 30 minutes earlier than you would normally just to get in the word and show God that you're being committed to him and you're disciplining yourself. And it sets the whole course of the rest of your day. Like there's so many things that come up, you know, playing D1 ball that like whether it's a test or a meeting or something like that that comes up randomly, and you're going to get every single excuse possible why you can't read or why you can't go to a Bible study. So you really got to make that discipline of doing it as early as possible so that regardless of what else happens in your day, at least you know you got that done as your foundation, you know? So that's what I would say for that.
It's good, bro. And how does one like not live in the condemnation of, oftentimes when we, are doing a particular thing? I know I experienced this during my playing days and even like coaching, to where
Yeah.
I would feel like extremely bad because I couldn't make a Bible study, or, you know what I mean? Like I would
Yeah.
kind of like, in a way, kind of beat myself up. And I know them thoughts are not from the Lord. So
Yeah.
how can you like just remind yourself of like saying out of the condemnation and knowing, like you said earlier, like this space that God has called me in, that's a way that I'm glorifying the Lord as well?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. Like, I think that you have to understand that you're doing things from God's approval, not for God's approval. So I'm reading the word because I know how I am without reading the word. I know that when I go too long without reading the word, I'm going to be less patient. I'm going to be less kind. I'm going to be less loving. And you see those things, you're like, man, I need to do this. I crave this. But it's not, if I don't do this, then God's not going to love me. Like, that's not the right perspective. I heard this, and it's like, he says that a true and proper understanding of God's love for you will change your perspective from if then to because therefore. And what he means by that is that our whole life we treat God kind of like a vending machine. Like, all right, if I put this dollar right here, if I say this prayer, then I'm gonna get this result. And that's a selfish perspective, and it's honestly like a perspective of like, you know, comes back to doing your own works and stuff like that and earning things. When in reality, it should be because, therefore, because of what Christ has already done, therefore I'm going to do these things. Like your works are the fruit of your salvation, not the root to your salvation. And I think that we have to understand that. So then now if I miss a day, like, yeah, I mean, I'm upset that I missed a day. I'm upset that I missed a study. But at the end of the day, like that's not what's going to save me. And there's always going to be another opportunity. You know, God is faithful to do that for us.
That's good, bro. That's good. And it requires a big sense of humility, like you said, to know that
Yeah.
um, we have a God that, man, I think like oftentimes we as people in society, we're not aware of the overwhelming grace of God. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
his grace is like, man, I just really been just thinking about that lately, bro, in my walk with God. So I kind
Sure.
of want to flip the script of when it's talking about that humility portion. as a athlete on
Yeah.
your level, or as a person that is always in the limelight of people watching the game, fans cheering, it can sort of get in the mode to where like we can start to think like, okay, it's me that's doing this. Like all these people are cheering for me, and then that can be like self-induced pride.
Mm.
So what does humility look like? I know that word is like thrown around a lot in our walks with Christian faith, but like, what exactly does it mean to take on that path of humility, like Jesus calls us to do?
Yeah, that's good. Taking up your cross every single day. Like humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And I feel like that's a big thing because we think that, all right, like I need to be like, lowly or I need to be less confident in myself, but that's not true at all. Like Jesus was supremely confident. All these men of God in scripture were extremely confident, and that's because their confidence wasn't in their own ability. It might have been in the work they put in, but ultimately it was because they knew that God was on their side. So I think that humility looks like confidence, but at the same time, also understanding that like God loves me so much, but he doesn't need me. He doesn't owe me anything. Like if the only thing he owes me is wrath and punishment, you know what I'm saying? The wages of sin is death. So if I just constantly have that perspective, that eternal perspective that like everything God grants me, football wise, whether it's a family, financially, like everything that he gives me is just grace. Like you talked about, the unmerited, undeserved kindness and favor of God. It's just I do not deserve it. And when you understand that, you appreciate everything rather than thinking that you're entitled to something. Because entitlement and pride is the roots of all sin. And humility, I feel like, is if God could have us understand anything, it would be like humility because pride is the root of all evil.
That's good, bro. That's good.
Mm.
Last question that I have for you, bro.
Yeah,
Looking back on your journey in this walk with Christ, like you said, looking back on those years in your early college years and even through your journey in high school, you can see the handprint of God.
yeah.
Um, like you said, why he brought you to San Diego, say you met your soon to be wife, you were able to spread the gospel to these teammates. So,
Mhm.
what is one thing that you would tell your younger self? You being a little bit more experienced in knowing the character of God. So, what will be one thing that or piece of advice that you can give to your younger self?
Don't grow weary in your waiting. Like, I think that for me, there was a time where, like, whether it was like, just I feel like I was constantly waiting on God, and I got kind of weary, kind of thinking like, man, like all these other people, and I'm sure a lot of you people listening are like, man, like all these people around me don't care about God whatsoever, and they're getting blessed. They're getting offers. You know what I'm saying? They're getting production on the field. They're getting better grades, and we think that, man, like why am I even honoring God in that way? And that's when I started to realize that I had my identity and I had my purpose rooted in the wrong thing. Like I didn't want my faith to be circumstantial. Like that's what I would tell myself. Like don't increase your faith. Don't pursue God more when things are going right, or don't only pursue Him when things are going bad in your life. Like just be consistent because God is consistent and His love never changes. So I shouldn't change and I shouldn't waver. And I think not even for my young self, I continue to remind myself of that now because just when I moved to Kentucky, I was like, okay, like God had I did all that stuff for the kingdom of God in San Diego, but like now it's my chance to ball. Like it's football time. And that was a huge temptation for me, and when football wasn't going the way I expected, or I wasn't getting that starting job initially like I thought I would get, I started to be like, man, like what am I doing here? Like I started to fall again like I have in the past. But in reality, I needed to understand that like if all I do here in Kentucky and if all I do in life is play football, or whether I go to the NFL or this is my last year, if all I ever did in life was play football, then that was a huge waste of time and a huge waste of talent. And I think that when you realize that, it's like, okay, like that is much what I do for God and His kingdom is much more impactful than how many sacks I get, how many tackles I make, or anything like that. Like it's so much more important. So I would just tell myself to don't grow weary in waiting, whether that's with the relationship, whether that's with football, whether that's with anything. Like be patient because every single thing that's happened in my life has brought me closer to Him. So don't look at those trials as you know, a bad thing. Look at it as an opportunity for you to grow closer to God.
Like I said, man, I didn't want to take too much of your time, but I
Yeah,
really
bro.
appreciate you for hopping on, man. You got fall camp coming up, man.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
praying over you. I'll
Thank
definitely
you.
be praying over you for a healthy season, man, and a successful season. And I just appreciate, bro, like hearing your words, man. It's, bro, like when I tell you, like transferring out to San Diego State, bro, like
Yeah.
I initially just felt like so alone, right?
Mhm.
And I appreciated the way that you had Christian on the podcast a couple of weeks
Christian.
ago. I
Yeah.
appreciate the way that y'all really like took me in or like wrapped your arms around me, like making sure I'm straight, taking me to those Bible studies. And
Yeah.
that ultimately ended up being the seeds that planted for me to follow and deepen my relationship with Christ, bro. So
Yeah.
I appreciate everything that you're doing for the kingdom, bro. And I just want to encourage you and let you know, bro, keep being a beacon of light out there in Kentucky, bro. And I'll be following with you the whole way, bro.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man. Same to you, bro. I've been watching the podcast from afar, and then you've always been a light ever since I met you, bro. So I'm super grateful, and keep on being that light to the younger generation.
Turn on the lamp. I don't go postal till God give it stamp. We going global, I'm been with the champs. I said the oval, they told me I can't, huh? What you know about the journey? Laying the rest on that gurney, praying because it's too early. This injury won't destroy me. It's just a part of the story.